The most dangerous aspect behind giving up is that it all too easily feels like the most or only correct option in any seemingly overwhelming situation. G'day mates and fellow adventurers, my name is Mordecai. There are a lot of circumstances that can result in an event of significance which causes the total disappearance of hope. This in turn creates what can be described as the feeling of being trapped in a no-hope situation. The lack of hope in such situations often creates the feeling of being overwhelmed, and thus results in the appeal to simply rack off, the illusion that giving up is the correct option. However, something that is often overlooked is the difference between a correct option and the right option. It can mean the difference in either resolving the problem in a manner that is satisfactory for all involved, or it can result in long-term speculation on what could have been. Even so, the choice on how to mend the situation can in itself present its own conundrums, its own systematic breakdown of one's self-confidence as a result of circumstances beyond one's control. This is what we can refer to as a scenario of budding copium. Before we get started with the story for the video, if I get to 1000 subs before the end of 2023, I have plans to cover an RPG story which predates the subreddit and contains one of the most infamous characters in all of tabletop role-playing game history. Let's delve into the often terrifying world of r/RPG-Horror-Stories. Today's narrative is titled Thinking of Quitting DMing Over Several Bad Experiences and Failed Campaigns, and is written by user KinaLita21. I am a bit of a first-time poster here, so I'm not sure if this even counts as a horror story, and I apologise if I get the tags wrong or how it works, but I thought I'd share it nonetheless, since it's really gotten me bummed out of DMing D&D and DMing in general. To set the scene, I've been running a Wild Beyond the Witchlight game for some time, now that ended about a few weeks ago. It started out fun at first. The Session 0 was a huge success, and everyone seemed to be excited and have great ideas for characters. I even made it clear during the Session 0 that I would recommend not rushing through the Carnival section, as that would be the introduction where we can reassess how everyone feels about playing with each other. Cut to the game itself, and things slowly start to show problems. The first session is normal and seemingly fun. But as soon as the next session is scheduled, we have problems as several of the players immediately have cancellations and force us to skip out that week. That's completely reasonable, but a bit weird to have trouble immediately after the game started, but oh well. Then it kept happening. One player, who we'll call Joe, ended up missing 3 sessions in a row and would have likely missed a 4th if the campaign had continued. Over the course of the entire short campaign, they showed up once, and that was it. Of course, we didn't cancel a session over one person, so we just kept playing. Unfortunately, the troubles didn't stop there. One of the other players, who we'll call Mary, started acting a bit disrespectful. They would sigh and grumble whenever I would disagree with them, speak out against my actions, and would constantly roll checks without me asking them to. So much so that, in one case where they were trying to throw a ring at a ring toss, I said, "Well, with how you described everything, I would have actually let you land that ring, but since you rolled anyways and got a low number, I guess you failed." As a way to try to encourage them to not do that. They kept doing it, of course, and all of this culminated in a scene where they had to climb down a large wall. Mary immediately tied a rope and began climbing down, and immediately rolled an athletics check without me telling them to. I told them that it was not needed as climbing down with a rope was not difficult, to which they responded with, "But it's more fun that way!" and just gave the most irritated sigh and glare. I let them continue and describe how they came down based on their roll. I know it probably is more fun to roll dice and have that extra level of chance, but me personally, I don't see the point in rolling for every single thing, especially something as simple as climbing a rope. but perhaps I'm wrong on this, and it's simply a matter of preference. Regardless though, after the carnival introduction was over, I got the worst possible message I could get. Mary messaged me one night that she would not be able to make it next week because they were going bowling. Keep in mind that she had missed 2 of the 4 sessions so far, and would miss the 5th. When I asked about it, it wasn't even a special occasion. Her friends just invited her to go bowling during D&D night, and they decided to accept. It felt terrible, and like they were choosing their other friends over the game that I had so diligently prepared for them. So I brought this up with everyone. I held a talk where I addressed all the issues I had presented so far with the group, and how it just wasn't fun for me playing with people who seemed to not really care about the game, or even forming a friendship. The nail in the head was everyone almost unanimously agreed that they would be alright with stopping the game right there. No arguments, no attempts to get better, just giving up. That was incredibly demoralizing, and really made me feel like I wasted the entire campaign. Something that a noticeable amount of problem players don't seem to realize or understand is that any TTRPG requires a fairly serious amount of commitment. It is often said that scheduling is the biggest cause of problems for maintaining an active game, but there is something rather knocking about having a bunch of galahs decide to escalate an issue that could have been solved much easier. They weren't even willing to give fixing the problems a whirl, even when the poster was willing to properly discuss solutions. With how the attempt to get the campaign back on track didn't succeed, I want to take a detour to talk about the tale of Odysseus. For those who don't know, Odysseus was a Greek hero, who after the events of the Siege of Troy, was shipwrecked upon an island, on his way home. Some versions of the tale depict the shipwrecking as a punishment from the Greek god Poseidon. Regardless, Odysseus spent no less than 10 years trying desperately to get his crew home from their struck-down voyage. Everything that they had attempted to do to get off of that cursed island resulted in their situation feeling more and more hopeless. In this situation, Odysseus and his crew would have found themselves in a no-hope situation. A land of depression and budding copium, in merely trying to keep their spirits high. Just bear the tale of Odysseus in mind as we continue with the story. During this whole time, I was actually running 2 games a week, the other being a Lost Mines of Phandelver game that had gone on just a bit longer than the Witchlight game. This game unfortunately was not doing good as well, and it would not be long before it would end as well, with currently the Phandelver game having just ended last week. The issue started fairly early on, where one player immediately ghosted the entire group after the first session. They were quiet and did not come online until 2 weeks later. Apparently they had come down with the pandemic, and that was why they were offline, so I gave it a pass. We can't predict illnesses, and I'm sure he was having a fairly hard time. But the problems would quickly continue. During one particular incident, we had a session that was set up during the World Cup. In particular, the game was going on while Brazil was playing a game, and we had a pair of Brazilians in the game who were just obsessed with the World Cup, to the point that they were just not paying attention to the game. This all culminated in the fact that we had to end the game an hour earlier because every time I asked for what the players were doing, I would be met by silence because they were watching the World Cup, and I just could not handle it anymore. Keep in mind, I mentioned in the Session 0 that I asked everyone to be attentive and engaged during the session, as it's surprisingly common for players to be doing something else whilst playing online. So that was a terrible experience. Along with this, however, we had another player who we'll call B. B was a uni student with a pretty bad schedule. They had applied to the game knowing that their uni class ended exactly when the game was set to start, basically making it impossible for them to show up on time. They only told me this after they had gotten into the game. A bit irksome, but I thought nothing of it. So I asked all of the other players if they were alright starting an hour later than scheduled to give B some time to get home and play, to which everyone agreed and we kept playing. Unfortunately, they would still show up late. Very late. Of the 10 sessions we played together, B only showed up on time for 1 of them. That may sound bad, but that's because Bear only showed up for 4 of the 10 sessions. She was so constantly busy that she was practically playing every other week at points and always had a different excuse. Oh, I have an exam this day, or oh, I have to perform a presentation. To the point where they actually just stopped telling me they would not show up and would just not show up at all. Bearing this in mind, I always ask for people to tell me in advance if they cannot make it unless it's an emergency. This woman though, she thought that she had missed so many sessions that she might as well not even warn me anymore. She wasn't the only one who missed a few sessions. Another player who we'll call Liam was constantly away towards the later sessions as well. Near the end of the campaign, they did not show up to the campaign for 1 month. 3 sessions with another session we had to cancel because too many people did not show up. Their reasoning for this was exams, but I have never heard of exams that took an entire month. It is also worth mentioning that Liam was a pretty bad player beyond their bad attendance. He came to me with a homebrew subclass that was a rework on their Wild Magic Barbarian that basically made their D8 table a D12. The only problem was that these additional options were horribly imbalanced, like hilariously so. Incredibly weak results like as a reaction to being hit with an attack, you can teleport up to 30 feet in any direction, would stand right next to incredibly broken options like you summon a simulacrum of yourself for the duration of your rage that moves and attacks with you. I spent an entire night combing through their homebrew material and reworked everything to be on the same level. It was so time consuming because everything was imbalanced, and I tried to keep the essence of what he wanted into the class. And okay, that's perfectly fine. I'm cool with doing work for my players, but I really should have seen that as a red flag. Cut to the week before the end, Liam decided to message me that they won't be able to attend the next session because they were going to a concert. This happened a week after the bowling incident with Mary, so I was just fed up. Obviously, if you're going to a concert, you had to book tickets in advance, meaning you either forgot that we had a session the night you were going to the concert, or you booked the concert knowing full well that we had a session and did so anyway. Either way, that was just absolutely terrible and got me fuming. This happened a week after I brought up all these issues in an after-game talk where I told them that their behaviour was not good and made me really not have any fun. Long story short, with all the issues with the group, the constant lack of attendance and poor behaviour during the campaign, I immediately shut it down and cancelled the game. And so here I am. 2 failed campaigns that felt so out of my control that I don't even know what to do anymore. I've never felt so disrespected, blown off, and just taken advantage of. All the time and effort I put into the games I prepared felt like a waste, hours of work and prep down the drain for nothing. Obviously no D&D is better than bad D&D, so I should be glad that I'm not dealing with something I'm not having fun with anymore, but it still feels incredibly frustrating and saddening. Is this just how players are? Is it impossible to find a good group where players show up and act like decent human beings, and actually respect everyone at the table, including the DM? I've felt so exhausted. I love D&D and TTRPGs in general, and DMing and telling stories have always been my passion, but now it just feels daunting. What's the point in trying again if no matter what I do, no matter how many interviews I conduct or session zeros I organised, it's just not going to matter in the end? Sometimes I wonder if there would be a lot more DMs in the world if players were a lot better. I know everyone likes to complain about bad DMs, and everyone likes to point the finger at DMs for being the culprit for a lot of bad campaigns. But from my experience, almost all of my bad experiences have been with players, and no matter how hard I try to make a wonderful, fun game and experience, it just goes to waste. So now my table stands empty, my DM screen barren, and my motivation tanked. It's sad, honestly. This game brought me so much joy, and I would constantly push myself just to get that little bit of appreciation and awe from my players. Now that it's in the past, and I don't know if I even want to continue DMing anymore. And that's where the story ends. Unfortunately, the story's poster is currently stuck in their own no-hope situation, as a result of multiple yobbos that decided that they would rather continue to create more problems than attempt to resolve them. In the case of the Wilds Beyond the Witchlight game, it was a set of players that were unwilling to even attempt to reschedule the game to another time and date to keep the game rolling. In the case of the Fandelver campaign, it was having that on top of disrespectful players, some of whom wanted to use absolutely busted homebrew to wreck the campaign. And yes, the whole, I have a concert to go to, and I have an exam on our specific time and day for D&D furfies, were code for, I don't want to play with a DM who won't let me be the main character. So, naturally, in trying to resolve all of the problems, our poster reached out to their players, trying to communicate with them the problems, so that a resolution could be attempted. But in trying to figure out a good solution to the problems that were being caused, the situation continued to devolve into budding copium. Welcome to a worst case scenario. Under these circumstances, the poster had no choice but to retreat to a safer position to consider their options. In a way, this mirrors what happened with Odysseus. However, we know what happened to Odysseus. After being stranded for 10 years on that island, he eventually returned home with his crew, and was given a hero's welcome upon said return. Giving up on returning home may have seemed like a correct option, but the right option for Odysseus was to never give up, was to keep trying. And so, here is my advice for the poster, and for anyone else who finds themselves in a no-hope situation. Do not give up. But for some more specific advice to those game masters who find themselves challenged by situations like this, try to rebuild your confidence by finding a good group of players who are genuinely enthusiastic for getting the game to work. Try to spot problem players early, talk with them out of game about the issues they are causing. Maybe consider posting on a public looking for game forum to find some true blue players. After all, whilst it would have been great to have that self-confidence from before the campaigns collapsed, there is strength in being able to rebuild that resilience. Most importantly, remember that Odysseus succeeded in his goal of getting his crew home after being shipwrecked for a decade. That means that you too can figure out a good solution and escape from the land of budding copium. Thank you for watching the video. If you like my content and want to see more or wish to support the channel, please hit the subscribe button and maybe leave the video a like. It's free to do, and every bit of support is highly appreciated. Also, if you wish to leave a comment but can't think of anything to write, let me know that you've reached the end of the video by commenting, "You can still fix it." Again, thank you for watching, and I shall see you all next time.
I thought I'd end my days as a pig on this miserable island.